The lamp on my helmet died at 4:12 in the afternoon, and when it came back on, my brother was standing at the end of the tunnel. He'd been dead for 9 years. I know how that sounds. I've had a long time to think about how it sounds, and every version of it makes me sound like a man you shouldn't trust. So let me give you the one true thing I can prove before I tell you the things I can't. The Hollis Seam mine closed in 1994. The last crew walked out, the company sealed the main portal, and by law nobody was ever supposed to go back underground again. Somebody still has to, though. That's the part people don't know. A closed mine isn't a dead thing, it's a slow one. Water keeps rising in the low workings, and if the pumps quit, it floods the aquifer that feeds half the wells in the county. Methane keeps seeping out of the coal whether anybody's mining it or not. The roof keeps settling, year after year, groaning down toward the floor. So the state pays a man to go in twice a week, check the pumps, sniff the air with a meter, and make sure the mountain isn't quietly getting ready to kill the town on top of it. For the last 2 years, I was that man. My name's Dell. I was 46, divorced, behind on things I'm not going to list for you. I'd grown up around coal. My father cut it. My brother Tommy cut it, until a section of roof came down on him 2 counties over, and they brought up what they could find. So when the state offered me a set of keys to a hole in the ground, I told myself it was just concrete and water and gas. I told myself I didn't believe in anything I couldn't put on a clipboard, right up until the mountain started keeping a list of its own. The first thing was the temperature. A mine holds one temperature always. Deep enough underground, the rock doesn't care what the sky is doing. The Hollis Seam sat at 56 degrees and had sat there since before I was born. You could set your watch by it. You could set your life by it. The steadiness was the only comforting thing down there. My 3rd week on the job, I stepped through a pocket of cold. Not a draft. A draft moves. This just hung there. A slab of air maybe 10 feet across, easily 20 degrees colder than everything around it. Sharp enough that my breath fogged for 3 steps and then stopped the moment I passed out the other side. I put my meter in it. 56. The meter said 56, steady as ever, while my skin was screaming freezer. I noted it. Cold spot hallway. The way you'd note a squeaky hinge. I didn't know I was writing the first line of a list. I didn't know the mountain was already writing its own. The second thing was the boots. There was a pair of work boots sitting in the middle of the floor at the 9 East crosscut. Old, cracked leather, laces rotted to string, steel toes gone orange. They sat side by side, neat, pointed down the tunnel, like a man had stepped out of them and kept walking. Junk in a mine gets kicked around, buried under rockfall. These were set down careful, and they were dry, in a section where everything else wept water. I didn't touch them. I noted them and went home. 2 days later, they'd moved. Not gone. Moved 30 feet further down the tunnel, still pointed away from me, still neat. And in the old dust between where they'd been and where they were now, there were no tracks. There were my prints from Monday, my prints from Wednesday. Nothing else. Whatever wore those boots had covered 30 feet without touching the floor. I stood there running my light across that dust, waiting for it to explain itself. And that's when the boots turned. Both of them, at the same time. A slow scrape of rusted steel on rock swinging around in the dust until the toes were pointed straight at me. Nobody in them. Nothing near them. Just 2 empty boots deciding in the dark to face the only living thing down there. I did not stay to see what they did next. I told my supervisor. His name was Ray. He didn't laugh. That's the part I want you to hear. He got quiet. Then he said, "How many so far?" "How many what?" "Strange things," Ray said. "How many have you got?" I told him 2. He looked at me a long moment, like he was weighing something. Then, "You get to 8. You call me. Anytime. Day or night. You don't wait. You don't finish your shift. You call me." I asked what happened at 8. "Nothing," he said. "If you're careful." And he wouldn't come back to it no matter how I circled. But he'd said if you're careful the way you say it to a man walking out onto ice. I had a list now, and a number to reach. Let me tell you about Ray, because he's the man this whole thing turns on, and I didn't understand that until it was too late. Ray ran the regional program out of an office with a bad coffee maker and a wall of binders. Big, heavy, tired man. The kind of tired that isn't about sleep. He'd been doing this 30 years. Before that, he'd been underground himself, a real miner, back when the Hollis Seam was still cutting coal. The week after the boots, I drove out to see him. I wanted to know what I'd signed up for, and Ray was the only door I had. He poured me coffee I didn't want, and sat across from me and let the silence go on too long. Then he said, "You know why they really closed the Hollis Seam?" I said the coal ran thin. That's what everybody said. Coal didn't run thin. He turned his cup a slow quarter turn on the desk, not drinking it. In '94, they lost 4 men in a week, not to a fall, not to gas. They just didn't come up. Last one walked into 9 East on a Tuesday, and the crew heard him knocking for 2 days after his lamp battery should have been dead. Company sealed the portal, wrote it up as a closure, and quietly put a man on to watch it. Because the ones who sealed it understood something, he finally looked at me. You don't seal a thing like that to keep people out. You seal it to keep it fed slow instead of fast. I asked him what it was. Nobody's ever known what it is, Ray said. 30 years and 11 men, and not one of us could tell you what it is. We only know what it does. It counts. It gets a man down there and it shows him strange things, one at a time, and it needs him to notice each one. It needs a witness. He said the next part carefully. 8 is when the witness becomes the door. I didn't understand yet. I asked why he kept sending men down at all. Because if nobody goes down and counts, Ray said, it comes up and counts for itself. It came up in '94. That's what the 4 men were. He set the cup down. Somebody has to be the one it's counting. I hire the 12th man every time, son. I've hired a lot of 12th men. The way he said it, a lot of 12th men. I should have stood up and put those keys on his desk right then. Instead, I asked him how he'd gotten out. Because he had. He was sitting right there. 30 years later, a man who'd been down there and lived to grow old and tired behind a desk. Ray was quiet for a long time. I didn't get out clean, he said finally. Nobody gets out clean. You just get out enough. And he wouldn't say another word about it. And I drove home thinking I'd hire a 12th man too, someday, if it meant I got to be the man behind the desk instead of the man in the dark. I understand now that's exactly what he was counting on me to think. The third thing was the tapping. Old miners had a language for the dark. Knock on the rails, send it through the rock. 2 for okay, 3 for trapped. My father taught it to me the way he taught me to bait a hook. I started hearing 2 knocks, always ahead of me, always around the next turn. The first time I answered it, pure reflex, 40 years of muscle memory, picked up a rock and knocked twice before my mind caught up and told me there was no one down there to hear it. The knocking stopped. Then from much closer it knocked back, 3 times. Trapped. I didn't answer that one. And I understood, in a way I couldn't have explained to Ray, that I'd made a mistake. That answering had told it something. That I spoke the language. I got out faster than I've ever moved. And the whole way up that long hallway toward the little coin of daylight, something behind me kept pace. 2, then 3. 2, then 3, passion. Trapped. That was the third thing. The one where I stopped blaming the wiring. I need to tell you about Tommy, or none of the rest of this will make sense. My brother was 3 years younger and better than me at everything that mattered. He was the one who stayed. When the Hollis Seam closed and this county started emptying out, I left. Took a warehouse job in the city where the worst thing that could fall on you was a pallet of paper towels. Tommy stayed and kept mining because it was the only work he loved. And I used to call him a fool for it. He was 39 when the roof took him. They didn't reach him in time. And in the report, I read it more times than a sane man should. There was a line from the rescue crew. When they finally dug down to the section, they could hear knocking. Faint, 2, then 3, coming from under the fall. By the time they got to him, he'd been gone for hours. The coroner was clear on the timeline. The knocking couldn't have been him, but somebody knocked, down there in the dark in my father's language, long after there was anyone left alive to knock. Nobody ever explained it. It went in a report, and the report went in a drawer. So when I heard 2 knocks in the Hollis Seam, the broken part of me didn't run. The broken part of me wanted to knock back and keep knocking until the dark gave me my brother. That's the wound. The mind didn't pick me by accident. It picks men with a reason to stay. The fourth thing was the book. A logbook lives in the steel shed by the portal. Every man who's held this job since 1994 has written in it. Date, readings, anything worth noting. 30 years of ordinary men writing ordinary numbers in the same book. I read the old entries. It's lonely work, you take company where you find it. And I noticed a pattern that turned my stomach cold. Every man's writing was steady for a while. Then, near the end of his time, it changed. Got smaller, shakier, started to repeat. One man in 2003 wrote the same line 4 days running. Counted 6 today, just that. Then his entry stopped, and a new hand picked up 2 weeks later, steady and neat, starting the cycle again. I counted the men, 11 before me. And on the inside of the back cover, in 11 different hands, was a list of numbers, 1 to 8. Some crossed out, some circled, little shaking notes beside them. 3, don't answer. 5, it wears your voice. 7, do not turn around no matter what it sounds like. And under all of them, in the last man's hand, pressed so hard it had nearly torn the page. 8 is the door. Don't let it get to 8. Ray hadn't given me a job. He'd given me a place in a line. 11 men had counted before me. Everyone got scared and shaky and stopped. And the job had always found a 12th. Something was counting. And it wanted to get to 8. I should have quit right then. I want that on the record. I sat with the proof in my hands and I did not quit. Because I told myself I'd be the man who broke the pattern. I'd stop at 7. I'd never give it the 8. That's how it gets you. Not with fear. With the idea that you're smart enough to beat it. 11 men before me had thought the exact same thing. In that exact shed, holding that exact book. The 5th thing wore my brother's voice. I was at pump station 2 taking readings when I heard him say my name. Dell. Not close to it. It. The catch he had on the DA, our mother's accent still living in his mouth. My brother's voice, from the dark behind me. I've spent 9 years wishing I could hear that voice one more time. And there it was. Warm and alive and close. Dell, I'm cold. Come get me. The logbook said do not turn around no matter what it sounds like. I turned around. Nothing. Just black tunnel and my light shaking on the walls, because my hands had started to shake, the way the old men's writing shook near the end. And from the dark, very softly, my brother's voice said, "You always were slow, Dell," which is a thing he actually used to say to me, a thing nobody alive knew he said, a thing that was in no report and no drawer. Then it laughed with his laugh, and the laugh went on a beat too long, and slid down into something that was not a laugh at all. It hadn't worn my voice. It had gone into the wound and worn his. I marked it in the book. My hand shook when I did. I looked at my own writing, small and unsteady, and I thought about the man in 2003 writing counted 6 today over and over, and I understood him completely. He wasn't crazy. He was just counting, the way you count the floors falling in an elevator with a cut cable. The 6th thing was the water. The whole reason a man goes down there is the water. The flooded low workings, black and still, filling the deepest tunnels like the mine's own private sea. I'd read the gauges 100 times. That day the gauge read normal. But when I put my light down the flooded incline, the water wasn't still. It was breathing, rising and falling, slow. 6 inches up, 6 inches down. A swell with no wind and no source, in a sealed pool 1,000 feet underground. The rhythm of a chest. And it was creeping up the incline toward me. One breath at a time. I backed away. From under the water, muffled, patient, came tap, 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 tap. Somebody knocking from the bottom of the flood. And then a hand broke the surface. Not reaching. Just rising. A pale hand and a pale arm, and then the top of a head, wet black hair tilting back out of the water inch by inch as the flood breathed up to lift it. It came up until the face cleared the surface. And the face was mine. Not Tommy's. Mine. My own face, eyes open, coming up out of the black water to look at me, calm as a man rising from a bath. Its mouth was already moving before it cleared the water. It was counting. I couldn't hear the numbers. I could read them off my own lips. I ran. That's 6. I didn't finish the readings. Behind me, the water roared up the incline and something in it kept counting in my voice. I called Ray that night, told him I was at 6. told him about the voice, the water, the face. He was quiet a long time. Then, "It showed you your own face." I said yes. That's new. Something in how he said it frightened me more than anything underground had. It never did that for me. It did the brother and the knocking and the cold. It does the same tricks, mostly man to man. But the face in the water, that's not a trick, Del. That's it telling you where the counting ends. He drew a breath. It's showing you who's going to be down there when this is over. I told him I'd stop at 7. I'd stop counting. Every man says that. His voice was so tired I could hear the 30 years in it. But the 8th thing isn't something it does. The 8th thing is something you do. And it's already got its hooks in whatever you'd never be able to look away from. It found yours yet? I thought about Tommy's voice. You always were slow. Yeah, I said. It found mine. Then don't go back down. Let it starve. It can't do a thing if nobody's counting. A pause, and then, quieter, the closest he ever came to telling me how he got out. That's how I did it. I stopped at 7 and I never went back, and I let it sit down there hungry for 30 years. It's the only way anybody's ever walked away. You just stop, and you live the rest of your life listening to it not stop. I meant to listen. I want that on the record. I stayed up top 11 days. Let the pumps run without me. Sat in my truck at the portal in the daylight and did not go into the dark. And every day the not going got harder, because every day I could hear him. That was the 7th thing. Tommy's voice drifting up out of the portal on the cold air. Just my name, mostly. Del. Just I'm cold. And once, at 3 in the morning when I couldn't sleep and drove out there like a man driving to a lover, "Why did you leave me down here?" Which is the exact question I've asked myself every night for 9 years. Why did I go to the city and drive a forklift while my brother stayed in the dark? Why wasn't I there to dig? The mountain knew that question was the door in me. It had known from the start. Every strange thing had been a step toward it. The cold, the boots, the knocking, the book, the voice, the water, all of it walking me down toward the one thing I would never be able to refuse. On the 11th day, I heard him crying. My brother, 46 now if he'd lived, crying like a boy in the dark under 1,000 feet of rock, calling my name. I took the keys off the dash. 11 men before me had told themselves what I told myself then, in the same shed, holding the same book. I know that now. I knew it then, and I went down anyway. The 8th strange thing wasn't in the mine. The 8th strange thing was me, walking into it. The hallway was colder than it had ever been. The cold spot for my 3rd week had spread until the whole tunnel breathed frost, and my light showed it hanging in the air like smoke. My boots cracked through skins of ice that had no business existing at 56 degrees. The knocking started before I was 50 feet in. Not ahead of me now. Around me. In the rails, in the roof bolts, in the rock behind my shoulders. A whole chorus of trapped men. 2, then 3. Until the tunnel itself sounded like a heart the size of the mountain. My lamp flickered. It caught, dimmed, caught again, and in the half-second of dark between flickers, the walls were closer. I'd swear to it. Each time the light dropped, the tunnel breathed in around me, and each time it came back, there was less room than before. The timber props leaned. A trickle of dust came down through my beam like the first breath of a fall, and somewhere behind me, deep, I heard the long grinding groan of a roof deciding to come down, but slow, patient, the mountain in no hurry, herding me forward the only direction left. I walked toward the water. He'd be at the flood. I knew it the way you know things in a dream. The water was up over the incline now, black and breathing, lapping at the hallway floor where it had never reached in 30 years. And it had begun to rise faster, sliding toward my boots, so that I was walking down a tunnel that was flooding behind me and closing above me at the same time. Ice cracking under my heels, dust falling into my eyes, water climbing my ankles, cold enough to burn, breathing against my legs like something alive that wanted to be held. Tommy was standing on the far side of it. My light found him and held him, and he was exactly right. My brother, 39, in the gear he died in. His face turned toward me with an expression I'd have known anywhere. Behind him the roof groaned and let down a curtain of dust, and he didn't so much as flinch. The whole mine was coming apart, and he stood in the middle of it, dry, calm, waiting. He lifted one hand. "Dell," he said, "you came." And every broken thing in me wanted to walk across that black breathing water and take my brother home. Here is the 8th thing. Here is the thing a man does. The logbook had a line for it in the last man's hand that I hadn't understood until that second. 8 is when you believe it, not when you see it, not when you hear it. When you believe it, when the wound opens all the way and you decide in your heart that it's really him. That's the door. A living man's grief thrown wide open 1,000 feet down. It had spent 2 years and 7 strange things prying at me to get me here, to this one choice, and I almost made it. What stopped me, I've thought about this every day since, was that he lifted the wrong hand. Tommy was left-handed. He waved with his left. Everyone who knew him knew that. And the thing across the water lifted its right, the way a reflection would. The way something that had watched my brother but never been my brother would, having learned him from the outside like a mask learns a face, such a small thing. After the cold and the boots and the voice and the breathing water, a hand, the wrong hand. But it was enough. For one clear second the grief snapped shut and I saw it for what it was. Not Tommy, not anything that had ever loved me, just a shape that had gone into the worst room in me and put on the furniture. The water was at my knees. The roof was letting go in slabs now, cracks racing along the rock over my head with a sound like the whole mountain tearing a sheet. And the thing wearing my brother saw me stop believing. Tommy's face came apart, not into blood, not into a monster, into counting. The mouth split too wide, and the voice dropped Tommy entirely, and became a sound like the whole mine inhaling to say a number. And the water behind it stood straight up into a wall, and every knock in the tunnel went off at once. Not 2. Not 3, but a roar of them. 10,000 trapped men all screaming here in the same instant. I turned and ran up the hallway into a mine that was falling on me. The lamp died. Full dark water to my thighs, the roof coming down in the black behind me close enough that the wind of it shoved me forward. I couldn't see the coin of daylight. I couldn't see anything. I ran by the memory of the tunnel and the pull of the cold air. And behind me the flood came on breathing my name in my own voice and my brother's both. And the walls closed, and the ice cracked, and I felt the whole mountain settling down toward the spot where I'd stood believing. I don't remember reaching the portal. I remember the light, sudden, gray, unbearable, and cold air that wasn't hungry. I remember getting the steel door down and throwing the bolts while something on the other side hit it once, hard, from below, and then went quiet. I sat in the dirt in the daylight and shook for an hour. I never counted the 8th thing in the book. That's what I did that 11 men before me didn't. I got all the way to the door, and I looked at it, and I refused to write it down. I refused to believe it. And I hope, that's what starved it. They found a new man for the job. I made sure of that. Ray understood. Somewhere down there right now there's a 12th man's handwriting turning into a 13th, steady, then shaky, then gone. And I'm sorry about that in a way I can't put right. Somebody has to count. If nobody counts, it comes up. I called Ray one last time after. I wanted to thank him, for telling me enough to save myself. The number was disconnected. When I drove out to the office, the binders were gone and the coffee maker was gone, and a woman from the state said Ray had retired 8 years ago. 8 years. I'd been drinking his bad coffee for 2. I didn't ask any more questions. I think I finally understood how Ray got out enough but not clean. I think I understand what a man becomes when he stops at 7 and lets it sit down there hungry for 30 years and keeps coming back to the edge of it and keeps hiring the 12th man so it stays fed slow instead of fast. I think Ray had been down there longer than any of us. I think part of him never came up at all. I moved away. I don't live near coal anymore. I drive a forklift in a flat, bright place where nothing can fall on you but paper towels. And most nights I sleep fine. Most nights. But I kept the logbook. I stole it. Told myself it was to protect the next man, and maybe it was. It's on the shelf in my hallway. 30 years of ordinary handwriting going shaky at the ends. Last week I opened it to show my daughter, who's old enough now to hear the parts of my life I used to hide. I turned to the inside of the back cover, to the list of numbers in 11 hands. There was a new line at the bottom. Handwriting I didn't recognize, pressed hard enough to tear the page, wet looking, like it had been written with a thumb dipped in something. It said, 9. I never wrote a ninth thing. I never counted past 7 in that book. And the book has been in my hallway in the daylight, 140 miles from the nearest coal, since the day I carried it out of that shed. The list only went to 8. 8 was the door. I never found out what 9 was for. And last night, faint from the bottom of my house, from a basement that in this flat, bright place doesn't even connect to anything, I heard 2 knocks. Wait, 2 knocks. I'm here. I haven't answered it. I know better than to answer it, but it's patient. They're always patient. That's the one thing about the dark I understand now that I didn't before. It has nowhere to be, and it can count higher than any of us ever let ourselves believe.